Hello folks, it's your friend Bernie here. I am over the moon to be talking to Laura, who is one of the people we're co-creating an event with Laura and Stephen from Facework Group in London, and also Kofi from the Urban MBA. And so not just us four, like everybody's getting together, and we're making the biggest event we've ever done with the London Co-working Assembly since 2015, when Rebecca Collins ran the first London Co-working Assembly event. We've done like easily over 100 workshops, breakfast shows, meetups, workshops and stuff. And what makes what we're doing with Laura really special is it's like the combination of all the conversations that have come beforehand in one day, where we got John Alexander talking to Joyce about citizenship and how that is so important in our world today, especially in London. And then we move into like group discussions that Laura's organising at the event, and then we go to an unconference session. So it's a mix of people from, usually we just do co-working space operators, owners and community managers, and this event is people from local authorities, NGOs, universities, education, community groups, and co-working space owners, and people that supply the co-working space industry in London, all getting together to talk about how we can move forward together, particularly in the region of affordable workspace in London. And people don't have through £500 to go to a co-working conference, or £400 a month to have a desk to do the work in London. So it's a lot of people trying to make a difference, getting on the same page and moving forward. This is an amazing interview with Laura. I don't mean because I did an amazing interview, but because of, she near the end, she shares her roots and what drives her. And it was really, really special. So let's get into the show. Hello, folks, and welcome to this week's episode, because we do it every 2 weeks now, of the Co-working Values podcast. And all the way from sunny Peckham is my friend Laura. So Laura, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Hi, thanks for having me. This is my first ever podcast, so really excited to be here. Big question to get started. I suppose I'm known in my role as being the general manager of our affordable workspaces at the Facework Group. So we've got 2 spaces in, not sure that it's quite sunny, Peckham, but 2 spaces in southeast London. And I would hope that I'm known as a bit of a community facilitator and a community builder. Yeah.
And what would you like to be known for?
Oh gosh.
I know.
That is such a scary cool question.
But I deliberately didn't tell you before we started because, I want to see what you say.
Gosh, that is a big question, Bernie. What would I like to be known for? I think I would just like to be known as someone who has a really positive disposition on life and is hopeful about the future. Because I think there's a lot of fear in the world, particularly recently, right? So,
yeah, definitely.
I'm just very hopeful. And I hope that's how people see me in and out of work.
We do. I just before we came on, I was saying how in awe, in a very positive way, I am of what you and Stephen and the crew have done at Faceworks. So because one of the points of doing this is like to hear about you, and also about the event we're planning together on the 16th with John and Joyce in Peckham Levels. But so people get an idea when they come into that event and they say, "Oh, Peckham Levels, isn't this cool?" But what happens day to day around Faceworks and Hatchwork? Is it Hatchwork still?
No, I mean the name is a little bit confusing. I'm not going to lie. We're actually going through a big rebrand at the moment, but we are the Facework Group. We are a social enterprise that's been running for 4 years now, and what our mission is really to support adults navigating the ever-changing world of work, which is a big, scary place, right? And we do that through two things. We do it through training provision. So we run employability training programs and enterprise support programs, particularly for adults who are sort of facing barriers to employment and are the furthest from the labour market. And then also through affordable workspace provision. So as I said, we've got 2 workspaces and I manage both of those venues. One is in New Cross and one is in Peckham. So they're not far away from each other. And yeah, the one in Peckham, we're in a really cool building called Peckham Levels, which used to be a multi-storey car park, but it was repurposed around sort of 2015 or 2016. And yeah, before that, it was a underutilized car park, and it was repurposed to be a sort of community and cultural space for local people and local businesses. And we have a big unit inside of that, which operates as a co-work space for everybody.
What's it like running a co-working space in a multi-storey car park?
It's not easy. Obviously, the building wasn't purpose, it's not purpose built for having an office here. So there are some fun things, like we've got the sink area, like just outside of our unit, and it feels a bit like you're going camping. You have to go and fill up the water bottles in the morning. But no, it's great. Honestly, I feel like it's such a sort of down to earth building, right? And we have some local competitors which have some really fancy and aesthetically beautiful spaces, and we're definitely not that. It's a bit more industrial here, and yeah, I always say it's just a very down to earth space, but I think it's really functional, and we have a really great community offering, and there's a really good sense of community here, and hopefully our customers feel that the hospitality is top notch. So I think that's why people like us and why they join our space, because not everyone has the money to be able to afford a big fancy space, and they just want a space that is going to give them, the basics of what they need. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
It's very, very welcoming, and I like the feel when I'm in there. I feel like, if you ever watched, anyone listening, if you ever watched Red Dwarf or Alien, it feels like the way you have to, the big corridors where cars used to drive to find their car parking spaces, feels like a spaceship. And I think you folks, it's amazing when you walk in. It feels like it's very unique, and oh my goodness, this big space. And then there's this kind of, I remember you were bringing around coffee and biscuits and stuff like that, and it felt like a big warm hug in this very industrial feeling building. What about the other building?
So our other space in New Cross couldn't be more different from Peckham Levels and from our space in Peckham. It is so Hatcham House is in a Grade 2 listed building, which was formerly the Hatcham Liberal Club. It was a working men's club. And it's a really beautiful building. It's been restored quite recently, so it's actually quite modern inside. It's about half of the space that we have in Peckham, so it's a bit smaller. But I think everyone that walks into that space just feels, again, really welcomed. And it feels like a really cozy, lovely space. It kind of feels like a living room. It's got a sort of boutique hotel vibe to it, but without the pretentiousness. So yeah, yes, it does also have a baby grand piano. So yeah, I mean, the first time that I walked into Hatcham House, obviously I thought, wow, this is amazing, but because that's where I joined as a member. But something that did cross my mind is, because it feels quite grand, I think that could potentially be off-putting for people. Like, people might think, this isn't really a space for me. It doesn't feel like it's an affordable workspace because it is so luxurious, if you like. But I think as soon as people get to know the team behind the space, they don't feel that way at all.
And can you say a bit about the projects that run there for refugees? Because that was I know that's a long running project and really well done.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to give a bit of background, as I said, that was our Hatcham House in New Cross was our first co-working space. That's the one that opened in January 2020. And it was just used as a co-working space, although we did rent it out in the evenings and on weekends for events. But Facework training, we hadn't really developed at that time. We had developed some international projects, but we weren't doing very much in the UK. And then because of the area that it's in a very residential area, footfall was quite difficult. I mean, in the first couple of years after we'd come out of lockdowns and everything, it took off and it did really well, to the point where when we were offered a second space, it made sense for us to take on additional space. But then being such a small team, it was really challenging, and running two venues, especially when we really wanted to build that sense of community. And I think something that we value really highly is the level of hospitality that we give, and that's just hard to do if there's only like two of you and you've got two spaces. So we then, as Facework training was continuing to develop and grow, it made sense for us to flip the usage of that space and for it to just become our full-time training and events venue. So we now use it mostly for Facework training programs and activities to take place. And yeah, in answer to your question, that's really taken off in the last year. So Steve and Helena and Miriam from our team are responsible for running those programs. In the last year, we've worked with, over 100 refugees who are living in local boroughs, so across Lewisham and Southwark boroughs, helping them with support and access to jobs, employability training. We've also run an enterprise support program called Changemakers, which used to be run by Lewisham Homes, but we were commissioned to take over running that program. And that's really about supporting social entrepreneurs living in the Lewisham Borough to help grow their businesses. So yeah, there's been lots going on in the last year.
So because you worked in events and stuff, and going from working in events to meeting this broad range of people that you've encountered in the last few years, what's that been like for you?
I mean, I've always worked in like hospitality and events, in quite like, so when I've worked in events, it's always been internally for a venue. I've not worked for an agency. So I've been the person, liaising with the client who is hosting the event in the space. And it's always been for a hospitality venue. So it's always been for a restaurant or a bar space. So I've always had those like very sort of customer facing roles where I've met lots of different people. And I think that's what I love. I love meeting people. I love talking to new people. So it hasn't been that different in that sense, but I think co-working has allowed me to do that on a bigger scale, and especially meeting people that do very different jobs, which is something that I love about working in a co-work space.
Let's talk a bit about the event we're doing on the 16th and how we're bringing people together, because you folks came with the Cowork Plus thing, and we've got the Peckham levels thing, and we got John Alexander, and like what do you want people to find out when they come to that event?
So Cowork Plus was an initiative that we developed a couple of years ago, and it's something that we've kind of always organically done, but I think in trying to structure it a little bit more, our reason for doing that was like, look at all these amazing like other things that we've been doing aside from just offering a space. We should be, offering that a bit more formally, but also being able to present it to other people and say like, this is the value that co-working spaces can bring. So just to give you some examples of that, one of our Cowork Plus initiatives is the volunteer hosting scheme, which is something that we have sort of piloted from the beginning of since we first opened. And it's basically for members that can't afford to access the space as much as they'd like to, even though our ethos is centered around affordability and accessibility. So, we try to offer plans and memberships that are as accessible as possible and have a broad range of those. But there are still people that, fall through the gaps and for whatever reason just can't afford to use the space as much as they'd like to or would benefit from. But equally, there are lots of people that are really wanting to give something back. And so we developed the volunteer hosting scheme where it tackles one of our challenges, which is capacity. Being a really small team, it's really difficult to.
I've almost answered my own question there. Sorry, Laura, but is that what is going on for you?
I think good hospitality just shows people that you care, right? And people want to feel cared for. So we could offer a space that isn't hosted and someone just pops in every now and then to top up the coffee and the biscuits in the kitchen. And we have a cleaner come into the space, but there's not much more to it. But we feel it's really important to have a space that is hosted as much as possible. And we try to have a space that is hosted Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in those sort of core office hours. So that there is somebody that, if a member has a question, however big or small, there's someone that they can just talk to. It's just having that human interaction and knowing that there is someone there that cares about the service that we're providing. We're not just here to, we're not a real estate company. We're not here to just sell you a desk and we don't care about anything else. We want to make sure that people feel looked after and they're happy, but also a big part of co-working is social interaction. And it's great that you can interact with other members in the space, but we're humans that are running a company and we want to be able to interact with our members too. So it's really important that we have that kind of presence in the space.
So why is this so important to you? Because there's so many things I've seen you do in the short time I've known you where you're like really, give a shit about how people access access. You use that word accessibility a lot and affordable workspace. And I feel like I always feel like, and I've been part of this conversation of people running, co-working is a very privileged thing. It's like I can afford to go to another building, do my work and then come home again. And there's probably millions of people in London that would love to get into somewhere and they can't. And it's, probably somewhere between £100 and £200 a month that is the barrier for them being able to build something. And what is it that makes you, I don't want to say get up in the morning because that sounds like such a cliche podcast question, but what is it that gets you going about this?
I think community, firstly, is something that has been deeply rooted in my values from a young age. So, and also like social mobility and ensuring that people from less advantaged backgrounds have access to opportunities. Because of the background that I've come from, I came from a very low income family. My mum and dad, I grew up in a self-build housing cooperative, so which was owned by a housing association, and it was for people that couldn't afford to buy a home. It was a self-build scheme, and my mum and dad were two of the original self-builders. So my mum was actually pregnant with me when she was building our house. And wow. I think such an amazing scheme because it's very central in London. So, you don't really find spaces like that in London. And so, I think the fact that my mum was like pregnant with me whilst actually building our house in this housing cooperative means that I was born into, it was inevitable that I was going to have a passion for sort of community and giving something back. But yeah, it was a really, really cool place to grow up. And I feel really, really lucky that I grew up there. So there's like 10, actually now 11 properties on the site, and we have communal gardens. And it's a housing cooperative, so it's, run by the residents. We get like little pots of funding, and then we have like quarterly meetings where we can decide what we do with that money. And yeah, I think I've just, as I said, from a young age, I've grown up in that environment, which is like centered around community. And I really hate the word community because I just feel like it's so overused now to the point where it's like kind of losing its meaning. But I guess it means something different to everyone. And for me, community is really about giving something back as much as you are receiving from that group. So, we'd all chip in to help each other. Like I know all of my neighbours really well, and I grew up with, all the kids grew up together. But yeah, just also coming from a family that was low income, nobody in my family had ever owned a property, or only one of my 5 siblings has been to university. And I think social mobility and having that kind of access to opportunities is just something that's really important to me.
Can you like spot people when they come in who may need more of a hand, but they're not sure how? It's really hard to ask. I find it's really hard to ask for help in London, and situations I've been in my life, when I see someone, I can just say, "Oh, is that what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, man," and then you kind of know how to. I don't want to say help, but like guide them or point them in the right direction. Does that make sense? I don't want to sound like I'm saving people, but there's something you get from a lot of different experiences in life that gives you the ability to know what to do when you meet someone. Know how to see a person.
Yeah, I don't think that you ever know what someone has going on in their life. Just by looking at them, you can't judge a book by their cover, and you can't tell if somebody is, in a less privileged position necessarily just by looking at them. But I think it comes from, I really understand what you're saying, and that it's like it can be difficult to ask for help. And I guess some people find that easier than others. But I think it really comes from building really strong relationships with people and building that element of trust where people feel like they can tell you, this is what I have going on, and this is something that I'm struggling with. And that's something that we just do quite naturally with our members. We always have like a sort of trial and induction period where we spend a bit of time getting to actually know our members. And, some people aren't interested. Some people just want to come and use the space to get their head down and get on with their work, and that's fine. But most people actually, they enjoy that social interaction, and they feel cared for. If you're asking those questions and you're actually taking an interest in who they are, and we are genuinely interested in who our members are. So I think once we have built those relationships and that rapport, people feel more comfortable to open up to us and say, actually, I've been really struggling with this, and then that leads to a conversation of, well, if there's a way that we can help you, we'd love to.
It's such a skill to, curate, build, organize a community, to be able to have people say things like that. So we both need to hang up. So where can people find you online, Laura?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Laura Agnew. Where else am I online? If you visit the Facework website, which is just face.work, you can find out loads more information about the company. But yeah, I'd love to connect with everyone on LinkedIn. And if you are local, then just come and pop in and have a coffee and come and see the space. We're in Peckham Levels in Southeast London.
What's the nearest train station to Peckham Levels?
Peckham Rye. So
Peckham
yeah,
Rye.
it's got
See, I always
transport
orientate
links.
myself. And then we'll put links in the show notes to all of those things and the event on the 16th. And thank you very much for your time and attention today. Say goodbye, Laura.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and attention listening to our podcast with Laura today. If you go to the link in the show notes as how to get in touch with Laura, how to follow the work that Stephen and her and the crew are doing at the Faceworks Group and Peckham Levels in London. Remember, if you are in London, you are more than welcome to the 16th of April and then indeed all the London Co-work and Assembly events we do. And last of all, remember, fixing everything depends on our joint efforts, our values, our strong communities, because community is the key. Please follow, share, like, whatever you want to do. Leave a review of the Co-working Values podcast because it helps our shows impact in unimaginable ways. It also helps people in the wider general public and your neighborhood understand what co-working is, how it can help their local community, and how it can help them benefit in building their careers, their projects, and their own work. Thank you very much. Be careful out there. It is a jungle.